Good morning. Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate you are deciding to spend your morning with us. Um, this panel is about, just like iPad Plus, iPhone Plus. We decided to do Performance Monitoring Plus. So that's really the theme is harmonizing cybersecurity with user experience. So a lot of folks are here. Some of them are helping us to achieve this. But this really the idea behind this came as an end-to-end engineering, and what we really wanted to do was give you guys an idea that how this journey is happening within our agency and how multiple things are coming together. So we have people here. So my name is Raju Shah. I go by Raj. I'm a director of enterprise engineering. So basically we do end-to-end engineering when everybody says it's not their problem, things are working great. That's where we come in. We have here Nathan Hardy. He is from Joint Service Provider, our crown jewel, I call Pentagon, as soon to be Global Service Center. Next to him here on a picture and next to me here is Carrie Bean. She is the Chief of Network and Performance Management, specifically working for me and deploying sensors throughout the world, throughout the application, whether it's application-based virtual sensors, different software, you can talk about it. She is my lead for that. So all questions should be directed to her, not to me. Just kidding.
Thank you, sir.
We have Mike Butler. He is our endpoint. Some of them you guys are familiar with the DES contract. So as Global Service Center comes together, if you are long-time DISA, that used to be called DoDNet, that transform into DISANet transformed into DoDNet, and DoDNet is going to be the future now. They are going throughout the DoD, all the DAFAs, and then later COCOMs, possibly deployment. So he's looking at multiple way user experience coming from the endpoint side. Carrie is looking on the network side. Same thing Nathan is looking at the JSP side, and we are trying to look at how all those things comes together. Another theme you will hear is just not how this our performance management, automation, and using AI ML coming together to look at a single pane of glass view. So we know where our users, whether you are in a Pacific, whether you are in here or Konas, how your experience looks like. Because you gotta understand, the tactical or technical details is gonna say one thing, but user perception matters, right? It could be, and user doesn't care now on whether I'm on a wireless device on my endpoint with iPhone, iPad, to full-fledged, fully deployed computer. So that's kind of the area that we are really trying to go in. This slide might give you an idea what I was talking about. Individually, we all think that I'm meeting my SLA. You can see here, right? Endpoint device. Sorry, Mike, I decided to show you yellow for a second. He's not really yellow. But he's still at 97%. Application is saying, okay, application is performing a little bit poor today. Nothing against our data center or cloud providers. This is just a notional. This is not a real data. I just want to make sure. Network and WAN is 98%, cloud is 93%, and data that is gained, user is getting access as we move towards zero trust at 98%. But if you see collectively, pretty much everybody is meeting their SLA except application for a while. But if you combine effect, if you look at the end user, their experience when you see combined load of that is not going to be optimal. So we also take a lot of sensing from our endpoint customer. I think GSD. That's the name I was looking for in my mind. GSD also take a sensing of real user data. Same thing in Microsoft 365, we have also user data capture. How can we capture those analytics back into how the user felt? There will be always statistical delay, because if my experience was bad yesterday, I'm pretty sure today I'm going to say it's still bad, even though it's improved, right? So we are adding those kind of a AI/ML engine, and that's where I want to be honest. That's the reason you guys are here. That's where we probably need help from industry. That how can we do that predictive analysis? Second thing, all the sensors, whether it's application sensors, whether it's a network sensor, are throwing a lot of data. How can we do a predictive analysis on that side? So those are the questions that a lot of people have. This is just a notional diagram. As you can see here, users don't care where they are. They want the same seamless experience and access to those applications as SD-WAN and all those things are coming in place. So with all that thing, I'm going to start as a main panel member asking some questions that kind of a little bit thought provoking, so then you guys can ask questions later that what you guys are expecting DISA to do and what your notion about where DISA was going in. Idea behind this panel is clear up any misinformation out there. Again, we are also partnering with services. We already have strong partnership right now going with Air Force and somewhat Navy. We are also starting our discussion with Army. One good thing for you as a vendor is we all agree on a technical know-how. So if you are going to propose solution, we all agree on technical know-how. We have a product criteria in mind. I'm not saying product in mind, product criteria in mind. And we all agree what we want to achieve. So there is no line between that. Specifically Air Force, Navy, us, and somewhat Army, because Army has some other requirements that we haven't yet quantified. So that's one thing is pretty clear. There is one DoD product requirements that is out there. That's the first thing we did. Instead of having multiple things, changing solution, Air Force want this, Army want, no, there is no more that. So that's kind of a good start that we are trying to go with. So with that, I'm gonna go and ask some thought-provoking question. How do you think, three of you, and I want you to take some time to think about it, that's okay. How do you define, by the way, they don't have a question ahead of time. Purposefully, I did it that way. Performance monitoring and user experience that is happening in agency and why it's very important in digital world. So Carrie, or let's start with Mike, because you got to understand, endpoint is very important, right? Even though network could be an issue, because it's easy to blame, let's be honest. We have all done it. But endpoint can be equally important. So Mike?
Sure, absolutely. So it's been up there, right? Endpoint, end-to-end management. Thank you. And end-to-end management, right? The measurement of those services from the endpoint all the way to the services that, you know, mission partners or warfighters or DAFAs, all those folks need to go ahead and actually access those services. We're measuring those, not only from the application side and the endpoint performance, but also the network, the LAN, the WAN services. That's how we're measuring all those capabilities to kind of get that total view of endpoint, user measurements for performance monitoring. And it's very important because we need to be able to go ahead and find those bottlenecks. We need to be able to go ahead and find where the services are either being degraded. We also need to be able to find where the services need to be improved. So we're looking at this end-to-end service capabilities. We're partnering with vendors so that we can go ahead and have centralized reporting tools so that we can go ahead and provide information not only to the folks that provide our tier 1 service desks and tier 2 service desks, but also the engineers so they can go ahead and build those capabilities into future services. So not only just being able to go ahead and have the interaction with the customers, but also those back-end engineers that support the customers and the capabilities they need to design and to manage. We need to be able to make sure that we're tracking all those services and all those endpoints in those areas where the services interject with the capabilities that the users need.
Thanks, Mike. Carrie, you want to add some things?
Sure. So I definitely agree with what you were saying with the, the user experience and how this is important. So one of the things that we keep in mind is the user is our key customer. So everything we do has to lean back to what we're doing for the user and how we're improving their experience, how we are removing them as the sensor so that we are proactive and determining what is coming so that we can resolve it. So we want to improve the reliability across all the services. We want to look at all the various areas that they're touching. So the second and third order impacts that we're seeing, you might have one area that's being impacted, but with our tools and with what we're doing and the three of us working together, we're able to identify things that are getting ready to occur in the network so that we can pivot and we can work with our operations folks to adjust. So really aiding in that early detection and working together very closely.
Nate?
Yeah, and so I would just add to that, one, understanding our baseline, right? Understanding those indicators that we know that are going to cause an impact. And then when we get that, we don't want the customer to be the sensor, but I think we have to use that information and engage our customers as we're gaining this information and say, well, how did that impact you? What did you feel when we saw this anomalous behavior? And then using that, collecting that data, sharing it across the three of us, and saying when our thresholds may be set to X, but based on this feedback we have, we need to probably look at moving that threshold down a bit so that we can see the spike, see the trend before it gets to a spike, right? Yeah. So,
and just to add, I think as well, I think a lot of times we link the end user performance directly to IT and the services that those users are consuming, but it's actually the whole complete life cycle of a user when they join an organization or join an agency. It has to be when they're being accounted for when they're doing reorgs or moves, right? The changes that happen while they're using IT systems. Those are big parts of their overall user experience, right? So it may not necessarily link back to a particular system. I know we'll reuse that theme a lot, systems and networks and things like that. But as their life cycle, as they change their roles inside the organizations, their capabilities need to be able to adjust with them as well, right? They need to be able to go ahead and onboard efficiently. They need to be able to get access to applications as their roles change, as they move up the chain or have different capabilities that they need to have access to. All those capabilities involve the entire life cycle of the user at that agency or at that organization so they can go ahead and accomplish their mission.
Yeah, so I can summarize that, right? That optimizing user experience in this digital world requires, right, combination of technical informations, right, user experience feedback, to be honest, that is equally important. That's what GSD started collecting in last at least 6 months, definitely. Analytics on top of that. That's where probably a lot of information that we think we can improve a lot. That's the area I definitely need your help. And automation intelligence, right? That's another area that I'm missing, right? We have a lot of vendor here, and I can tell you that information from endpoint perspective and then the network perspective, how can I combine that information and do intelligence analytics with the user provided feedback? So that's kind of the area I think we are moving forward in his summary. And so that prompts me to ask a question, which is, I'm sure everybody's in mind what DISA is monitoring. What key performance metrics that you would like to track? I'm not going to say just you are tracking, but what you would like to track. If you can go on that route, that would be great. Can you want to chime on something? Start with Nate and then come down.
yeah. So I think some of the things we want to, as the service provider for the Pentagon, we have mission partners for which we provide services all the way down to the endpoints, and then we have those who we only provide transport only, and they provide their own applications and so forth. And we're also in a situation where we own a portion of the transport below the internet access points. So we want to monitor the entire health of the transport and then be able to see when anomalous behavior is happening, isolated to a certain application or service, so that we can engage those partners, the mission partner or our internal DISA partner, and say, hey, we're seeing this anomalous behavior. Was this expected? Was there a change that was scheduled to do this? So we look at round trip time to see, because you mentioned the customer's perception. Perception is reality, right? And it must be
Exactly.
managed. So we want to look at how fast they're able to get to certain websites, how fast they're able to get to their applications. So packet loss, in this, since COVID, we've gone to an environment where it was mass telework before, and now it's a hybrid environment. So it's even more stress on the network, right? From graphics and things of that nature. And customers, they want to see their slides change real time. They don't want to be waiting for that lag. So understanding, the correlation of what that experience feels like, and being able to say, okay, when we have this much packet loss, we know there's going to be this much lag in that situation. So using that knowledge and sharing that with the team so that we know what to look for, so we can be proactive, is the metrics we're looking for.
And I'd like to just jump in on that. So it's not just what we're measuring now, but it's looking at the applications and determining what they require. How sensitive are they? Certain applications may be more or less sensitive than others in the same realm. So latency may or may not be as big of an impact. So we have to understand, and that's where we work, with the services, with the application owners, the project managers, to understand their application so that we can determine what is it that we need to monitor for this particular piece at this time, and taking into consideration geographic location. You mentioned teleworking and on-premise users. You have the various theaters have their own special reasons for certain things, right? And so as we're working through that, we have to understand exactly what this user at this time using this service is expecting and needs, and what do we have to focus on. And so I definitely agree with you, and that's where our improvement into that AI and machine learning will be the key to help us really narrow it down, slice and dice it into the appropriate buckets so that we can continue to improve for every user as we're looking at the whole, the whole enterprise, but also each individual user consecutively.
Yeah, I think for me that means exactly what Carrie's saying as far as right sizing, right? So when you think about having all those analytics and all that data, that lets us know or senses us to go ahead and say, hey, we need to make the right investments for certain things, right? We need to make the right investments in certain theaters. We need to make the right investments in certain tools so that we can drill down into exactly what you were saying, the particular metrics that we need, and say, hey, this isn't built correctly, or this isn't scalable enough for us to go ahead and provide the performance that we want to provide, or the service that the consumer wants to use. So we do need to make sure we get those sensors and those datas right, so that we can go ahead and build efficiently, or actually go ahead and make changes, right? We need to go back and say, hey, we need to rebuild something. We need to go ahead and tear something down and restart over again. So all those things kind of lead towards right sizing.
And aligning those investments, right?
Correct,
So
yes.
that as an enterprise, we're doing things that collectively, because we don't have a whole lot of money. So you're spending it wisely where you get the biggest bang across the board, down to
Return
the
on
end
investment,
point.
Return on
exactly.
investment,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So I think, in summary, right, I can tell you that this is probably a first time, if you're a vendor here, that this is multiplying all the efforts and looking this end-to-end holistic way, that what the future investment looks like, where we need to make that investment. It's just not standalone project, right? Where the automation need to occur in order for getting that data, that user impact is happening in the milliseconds or with predictive analysis before it happens. That's where we want to go. And we are talking about how all these things are coming together. So in that sense also, right, we have a strong partnership now going with Air Force. We had a great visit by Air Force 6. So Thunderdome, where we have put some sensors there also to understand the user impact. What is the biggest challenge that you think, Carrie, starting with you, that you have encountered, and how did you overcome with it? Because I know this, I have tried it too. As a senior, I can tell you that having the multi-prone approach, multiple directorates itself is hard. Then working with the services and making sure that we are all on a same technical aspect. What do you think was your biggest challenge, and how you think that you were able to overcome that?
I would say the initial challenge we had was just understanding where we were looking when we were looking at this data and really digging into what we were tapping, how, the visibility it gave us, and focusing on it from the right perspective. And as we were talking to our customers, to each other, what was their visibility, and making sure that we were aligning the data. As we're looking at this, there are key elements, and so we're still working on it. What are those key elements? We're working with the data office to determine what are those areas, so that when we're going out and talking with our mission partners, with each other, with our technical partners in industry, what is it that we need, what is it that we want, and ensuring that we are all talking about the same thing from the same perspective. And so that has really led to a lot of great conversations internally and externally about architecture, where we're tapping and ensuring that we're in the right spots, what gaps we have, and what we can do with the current tools that DISA has to fill those gaps that we had never realized before. And so talking with these two gentlemen, their teams, and others, really identifying what were things we were missing, just because we didn't know about it. Not that they weren't there, but gathering large volumes of data, collaborating together, and answering the questions.
Well, end users, endpoints, and challenges is all real triggering for me, right? So just feel free to knock this mic away if I go too long. But challenges from an endpoint perspective or end user perspective, a lot of times circles back to maybe lack of data sometimes, right? So we were talking about collecting all this data and feedback, but from the end user perspective, a lack of data or feedback sometimes it can present a challenge, especially when we're talking about complacency, right? Hey, I've had this problem for so long, or hey, I've had this issue for so long, or hey, I just know that when I click on this particular application or access the network from this particular VPN concentrator or access the network in this part of the building, it's just a problem, right? So that feedback and sometimes that complacency that happens with users when they know there are some particular issues that are systemic on the network can sometimes cause that bottleneck of data flow back up to the engineers, to the operations teams that need to be able to go ahead and do that analysis in order to go ahead and triage, right? So those are sometimes some of the challenges that we have, as well as the data not correlating, right? So there may be times that the network's performing at an optimal level, but the users are still complaining about some type of issue, right? And there's a mismatch, right? The data's not aligning to what the user feedback is. So those are some of the main challenges that we have, and I'll digress there before I go too far. Nate?
Yeah, I mean, just to add to what you said, I think the customers learn to suffer in silence,
Yes.
right? And one thing Raj had mentioned earlier, talking about SLAs, I think looking at how we incentivize those who are collecting that data, who's managing the customer's experience, to get that information, we'll get the data that we can use as information, instead of trying to resolve we want to definitely resolve the issue as quickly as possible. We also want to collect that information so that now we know when certain things happen in the environment, it's going to impact the customer this way, right? And then we share the knowledge across the board. But I would say one of the biggest challenges from a service provider perspective in our environment has been, we're a 365, 24/7, facility, and we have customers who have real-world mission, things that are happening around the clock that they have to have their eyes on, So there's never the perfect time to do any kind of maintenance. So trying to get the customer to agree and feel comfortable that you've looked all up and down, left, right, with this change you're about to do, to give them that warm fuzzy, has been a challenge. But we have tools in place now that we are collecting data. We can say, okay, the last time we did this kind of maintenance, we failed you over, and this is what it felt like. And we can show them that empirical data to say, this is what we expect to happen. And we have lessons learned also, so that the experience should be better this time than it was the last time, right? So just getting that confidence, but it's also created an opportunity for us to engage with them more. So now they're feeling comfortable to call and say, I see this change you have scheduled. Tell me more about that. I want to know. I don't want to necessarily non-concur, but I want to understand what I can expect to happen. Right?
And I would say the three of us, the use of synthetic testing that we've started to deploy has really been key.
Game changer.
So with the synthetic tests that we are deploying, it allows us to have these continuously monitored tests and known applications. So, the big one that I think all three of us are using is the O365, where we have tests that go out in open Outlook, send an email, receive an email, and they measure each step of the way so that when a user calls and says, I'm at this location and this is what's going on, we have additional data that we can pull in and we can monitor and look at, this is exactly what we're seeing and where this is impacting, and we can start to look at other users in other geographic locations or other areas and use that data to help. Is it just this location, and dig into more specifics for that? Is this a wider area? And so I think that's really been the key for helping to elevate this to the next level.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that helps correlate that data. Exactly right. So when users have particular issues, and we can go ahead and match that up against that synthetic transaction or MPE type environments, then yeah, we can actually go ahead and say, hey, this is an issue that is systemic, or something that needs to be go ahead and addressed.
I think the goal is to get to a place where we're like our service provider for our self-service, right? When we get a update, they'll say this update is to fix these things. So the customer sees that we're listening to what they're saying. We're using their feedback. We're saying this maintenance we're doing is to fix that thing you told us you were feeling last week. Right. So, yeah.
Yep, it's just like my cell phone provider telling me that you are going to have a bad experience. That kind of is managing customer expectation, right? That simple communication goes a long way. So in certain cases, right, when we can't solve the problem, at least informing customer ahead of time goes a long way. And I can see with synthetic monitoring, we are trying to stay left of the ticket. We don't want to move towards sad part. We want to stay away as much as possible from a sad part of that. So that's, thank you. That's really probably people can understand. Another thing is you talked about synthetic monitoring that kind of caught my eyes there, right, is this is also harmonizing cybersecurity with user experience. As I always tell, user experience and cybersecurity is not the opposite side of the coin, but they are same side of the coin. Sense once, use many. And that's a theory we are moving forward. We are moving forward with the place where there is no cyber sensor, there is no RME provided, ETO related sensors, there is no user experience or performance sensor. There are one sensor who can give you a holistic view and help us, right? The sensor are helping us to define the discharge strategy, getting away from just paper-based ETO exercise and thinking that it's making it secure to real-time continuous monitoring, continuous ETO side of that. This is probably one of the game changer as DISA transform themselves as a more user experience kind of entity. So on that route, right, on a cyber side, I see you guys are moving forward. Can you give me some of the metrics that you are monitoring? I'm not going to say, like, keep it at a high level. I don't want you to go into specific than what you have found or other things, but I think audience will benefit some of the key performance indicators that you guys are monitoring to improve and take us, okay, better user experience, but just not that, making us more secure while we do that.
So I can start, sir.
Yeah.
So we, at the high level, we are able to ingest this data that was deployed, and we are noticing that working with our cyber defense operators, that we can detect things such as known vulnerabilities. We can monitor and we can see traffic patterns that we know are malicious traffic patterns, and we are able to use our tools to identify that and alert them so that they're aware as soon as that happens. We're also doing things such as monitoring certificates. When are certificates close to expiration? That will allow us to alert those systems and those individuals that their certificate needs updated so that there isn't an impact to the user when that certificate expires. So those are some of the areas that we are actively working, and we are working with our operators to provide additional details in the back end to reduce the pivot. So one of the other key areas is they have access to so many tools, and they're constantly looking at this system and this system and this system. How do they take that data and get that one common operating picture to give them the information that they need when it pops up? They don't need to go look over here and pull out this and then go over here and compare an IP address. We want to give them all of that information at a glance.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
well,
that on DCO side, also I want you to a little bit touch, if you can, in terms of no sooner, right? Customer is down, right? How this is transforming them, and how is it helping really our joint operation centers, right? JOC we call, right? How is helping them to move it forward? Can you answer
Yeah, I
that?
can still talk. So one of the things that, as we're working with them, so we have participated in multiple troubleshooting efforts. And so as we go through these efforts, we're constantly learning. We're seeing what it is that they need, what they're looking at. And so we are active partners with them at the enterprise level to facilitate answering those questions that arise in their field. So when we're looking at things with them, they're asking us about TLS handshakes, the impacts to that. We've had traffic questions. Oh, DISA, you're sending this data out. And so we're able to work with them to actually dig into the root problems and solve and provide that information so that they can go back to our customers and the DISA customers and present that information. So that has been really a huge key point, giving them the performance data that goes hand in hand with that cyber data so that they can identify what it is that's going to be impacting their users and link them together, because they are not stovepiped anymore. That data does go hand in hand. And so as you look at that cyber information, the performance is key. We don't need to be looking at things individually. We really have to look, it's a mesh of multiple directions across all of our enclaves to facilitate those.
Yeah, so I'm going to come on that too for ITSM perspective, right? How those data are getting sensed and automated with AI/ML and transferring that to ITSM tool is going to help that users to know sooner, right? So can you shed some light as a global service center as we move forward with how we can move?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of correlation that needs to happen as far as the predictive analysis we're trying to get towards, right? Actively opening tickets when those sensors detect certain thresholds that are being met, right? So being able to go ahead, correlate the data that's being ingested into our asset management systems, into the security posture, all those things being centralized into ITSM Plus, opening tickets, doing trend analysis, being able to pull the data from a set central reporting tool that allows and feeds the customer feedback that's necessary, as well as the dashboards that the customers are looking for as well. Those are the things that we can go ahead and start doing the heat maps, right? Being able to show user performance issues, also being able to show from a cyber perspective where there's posture changes as well, right? Where there's particular admin accounts that are being utilized in certain areas, or elevation of privileges, or there's a particular vulnerability or KB that needs to be updated. All those things are being fed into a centralized system like ITSM Plus, and what we're doing with our vendors there to do that predictive analysis and open up use cases, use cases as well as service cases with our vendors as well, right? So all that centralized data, being able to go ahead and look at not only from the endpoint perspective, but also the LAN services, networking and switching, our servers as well that support those end users. All those things are being fed into that central repository, and that's how we go ahead and kind of do that overall predictive analysis across the network.
Yeah. I think it's also a paradigm shift too, right? Because like from a performance perspective, we don't always know that what we're seeing is malicious or intent, right? We know it's anomalous. And what has happened before, like our team, they're looking at performance to the customer, the impact. Is this going to cause latency? Is this going to cause a bad experience? They're not thinking about it from a cyber perspective before. But our leadership was asking questions, like they will say, well, that's just, Tanium, traffic. It was expected, or that was just Tanium. Well, they wouldn't say it was expected. They would say that's just Tanium traffic, no customer impact. But leadership would be like, well, were we expecting that? Did we talk to that mission partner to say, were you planning to do something at this time where we should see Tanium traffic spike, right? And so starting that collaboration and changing the way they look at it and getting our cyber team involved and saying, hey, we saw this, what does that align with anything else that you were seeing from, a cyber perspective? And now everyone's looking at, and they've even changed the way they brief things now. It's like, oh, sir, yes, we saw this. We reached out to that mission partner. They were planning to do that. It was an ASI, blah, blah, blah. So we now, know to look, at it from a larger perspective than just how it affects the customer's experience, but how it also, improves our cyber posture, right? And so, yeah, I think as we get to that central repository where we can share that information, ITSM, like you said, having that knowledge base where we know what certain indicators actually were realized. When we see this thing, this is what it actually felt like in our environment. We can collectively share.
Blurring the lines basically between the service providers and the end users, right? Bringing them closer, right, from the metrics that they're seeing. I think that centralized ITSM type environment helps with that, right? So if the service providers, whether it's the network services or application owners and things like that, are brought closer to the end user from a reporting standpoint, I think that allows us to see a lot of the same data there for the users to be able to report issues, as well as the service providers to be able to react to those issues, or hopefully do that predictive analysis like we've been talking about. See, before something becomes more of a degraded state, they can see those reports back from the users and the user feedback in that centralized repository.
And it gives us the opportunity to compare traffic against policy,
Right.
and ensure that our policies are being appropriately applied and complied to, which is something that crosses both boundaries of both the cyber and the performance.
And that's key in our environment because, like I mentioned, we have a mixed bag, right, where we provide all the way down to the endpoint, but we also have customers who have their own applications and their own servers. And, so if they're not following hygiene policy, they're not only impacting or exposing themselves, but it could be the whole, residents of the Pentagon. So having ways of seeing that and knowing up front, say, hey, you have these servers that are on our top 10 list. They need to be, patched. They need to be, mitigated and that sort of thing, before it gets to a point where we're compromised.
And from a cyber perspective, real quick, I don't know if we've talked enough about, obviously, a lot of these capabilities across multiple classifications, right? So all of us here are looking at certain aspects of networks that, we may think initially NIPR, right? But we obviously support multiple classifications all the way to the special access programs that need to be looking at the same type of vulnerabilities or same type of performance metrics. So sharing this data across multiple classifications sometimes can be a challenge, but it's one of the ones that we are looking at to make sure we do the analysis and share the information, whether it's seen from the IC community all the way down to class and so on and vice versa, right? So we want to make sure that we're looking at the multiple communities that are looking at a lot of the same technology, because the tools don't necessarily change a lot of times from the multiple classifications. We just need to be able to go ahead and share that data effectively and where appropriate.
So no, really appreciate. I think this probably can give you guys some idea where holistically this is working together. Maybe first time everybody says that, but no, really, you can see that there are multiple organizations working together. Whether it's ICAM authentications or PKI cert, to looking at the cyber perspective from our risk management side, to end user and customer side, how all those things are working together, and then driving this. I think in a private sector, some of you work with other federal partner, CPIC PPBE activity that drives the investment in that area, right? We still need to make some investment in the endpoint side, right? We are open to it as we get more users on board. But you guys can get an idea that where we are holistically working together, driving the technology to look at cyber and user experience in a single mode. So that's kind of was really we were trying to deliver and how can we stay out of that circle, right? And how can we increase customer satisfaction and loyalty? Because this is not just DISA's answer. This is also the Air Force answer. This is also the Navy's answer. And this is also most Army's answer, right? So this is all services. So anywhere you can provide help. And if you have a better idea than what we are doing, we are happy to hear that. And if you want to point out something that we might have missed that you guys want to point out. So I will leave some time for question and answer. Unless otherwise people want to, like, do you guys want to add anything in closing before we start Q&A?
I think you summed it up wonderfully, sir.
Yes,
Absolutely.
agreed.
I think a lot of us have been working with the industry partners that have been here in some capacity, one way or another, right? So I see a lot of familiar faces, obviously, and we've been walking around. So we're open to the conversations, we're open to the proof of concepts, the demos, the information. So absolutely, let's continue to collaborate.
Absolutely.
Questions? I love this audience. No question.
Not Kareem.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My question is the common operating picture between upstream at DISA and what we see on the JSP knock floor. We have been, from a monitoring perspective, making strides, as Mr. Hardy is aware, and we share those screenshots with DISAJOC and the HAC. So what is the plan as we do this construct, right? How do we get that common picture from that scout or whatever tool that is being utilized and implement the AI/ML portion so that we can baseline and get that ability to predictive analysis, meaning you've hit a threshold before the customer even gets the impact, we can go in and see what's going on.
So I can take that
question,
one if you
yes.
want. So we were actually just
Just having
talking
a
about that
conversation.
while we were waiting for this to start. So one of the areas that we and OE are focusing on and that we've already started is a federated data sharing zone and analysis zone. So we are looking at setting up an enclave that allows us to share the data between our various enclaves, to pull in mission partner data and provide access to everyone in this area. So we want to be able to set up this zone that allows you to reach out and look at the data from not just the JSP, but from what we're seeing from our mission partners, the Navy, the Air Force, etc., to help answer the questions that are coming at you every day. And so that's what we're focused on. We're starting the conversation. I've already been discussing it with these two and more. And so we have buy-in from all over. We have buy-in from around the DoD for this. And so that is our way forward, and that's the next step.
Thank you, ma'am.
Any other?
Good morning.
Good morning.
So I listened to Ms. Nossenberger's opening remarks this morning, and one of the questions she was fielded or was given was, as the department goes forward, and of course they're talking to the Air Force, but as the department as a whole goes forward, and it's talking about investments in defense or investments in performance, what's the trade space, right? And her comeback was that actually we've lived in a world where we have kept those two things separate, defense and performance. And her point was, we don't need to be there anymore. In fact, they come together. So I'd be interested in your thoughts on that perspective.
So let me start first to answer that. So what we are doing here is Sandstorms use many. We also publish and it's available to services too, is our sensing strategy, first ever in the history of DISA. We also have automation strategy. So what we are trying to do is how the cyber prospect, defense prospect, DCO's prospect, offensive, defensive, both, as well as the user experience weaved into one, right? And that's the reason we had looked at this on going from top down and bottom up approach. Bottom is endpoint doesn't mean they're bottom, but what I meant to say is from coming out from endpoint perspective and top on a network performance that traditional network vendor trying to do, and try to meet in the middle with the federal research, single dashboard, where services have full view too, right? And there's a two-way street of data that they get a holistic view where we are, what the baseline looks like, what the normal looks like. As you know, normal is different every day. If it's a Thursday before federal holiday, guess what? Traffic should be different. If it's the same traffic, I better be worried, right? So this kind of, and with automation in AI/ML predictive analytics, if my traffic is same day before the holiday, generally all the time, I should be worried there is something going on, whether it's planned or unplanned. I need to chase that nugget, and where there's automation happens, as automation, another benefit is I have performance management. Now they call customer experience or user experience also underneath of me, and I'm also portfolio manager for automation. So that really helps me to drive that investment dollar in a right area to make sure that we are addressing both of them as a single sensor strategy point of view. Go ahead, Carrie, you want to add something?
Yeah, so I think with what Mr. Shaw was saying, as we're looking at the data, we are realizing, that we can use this for so many areas, and it isn't stovepiped anymore. We've already started these coordinations with our partners. We are asking, right, what else are you looking for? And digging back into the data that we have to determine what we already have at hand and identify the gaps between the two so that we can continue to evolve this, work with our partners, work with each other to enhance that. And just like what you were saying, sir, it really has helped because we can leverage the same thing. We're saving our funding for other areas as they're coming in, and so we're not going out and just attacking it with everything. We're able to really focus on what is it that we need, how are we spending this funding, and using our taxpayer money wisely while keeping that user and that end performance as our key goal for improvement.
So in the trade space, as she talked about, right, you are not having the silos of sensors. You have a single sensor giving you that information, and you can use it for what you need for, right? That's going to drive DSAR towards continuous ATO. That would be another game changer. As you know, all federal government is rushing towards it because ATO makes you somewhat secure, but the things get discovered every day, right? How you are doing that continuous monitoring, how you are doing that continuous monitoring for their applications and other things, or even endpoint, right? They get patch Tuesday.
I think it also comes with the mindset of designing with that at the forefront, right?
Right.
So building it into the tools that we want to deploy, build it into the solutions that we want to go ahead and design towards or engineer towards. Same thing. I promise I wouldn't use buzzwords like zero trust, but when we think about designing towards certain security solutions or implementing certain applications, we want to make sure that they are from the ground level built up to support end user performance or user monitoring and providing those particular metrics. So if we go in and have to go back to a particular design and bake it in later, we failed, right? We want to make sure that it's at the forefront of any solution that we go ahead and spin up or anything that the agency is going to put out there as a enterprise solution, not only from the endpoint but all the way out to the edge as well. It has to have user experience in mind as well as cyber.
And I think the ability to see anomalies across the board, and not worry so much about if it's a performance anomaly or a cyber anomaly, but an anomaly period, and then using that data and then determining what those anomalies actually mean from an impact perspective, because it could be both or isolated to performance or cyber. But I think if we tune the tools too tightly, where we're only focused down one path, we now have to have multiple, right? But if we have it broad enough and we learn from the data we're collecting, we can have, we can get multiple from one.
Yeah, so thanks for shedding light on that too, right? That look at the multiple enclave. I think Michael stated that that's gonna be another area that we are looking into. Now we have help desk, I want to use the word GSD in all three areas, right? Global service desk that can take all our calls 24/7, staff there, any enclave, right? We are not talking about just NIPR this. this is helping really a game changing for warfighters. We are doing the same thing on Super and other enclaves. So I think with CoComs coming on board and DAFAs coming on board, this is really going to transform the experience for all our warfighters. They have the tools that they need. Two important points again. We are looking for help, right, to do better predictive analytics. Endpoints are very, very important of this equation. We haven't lost our sight on endpoint, and we'll continue to look in that area by using TradeSpace. How can we have more things deployed where that allows us to look at endpoint, right? You can't install agent on every client. That's not a judicious for taxpayers' money, right? We need your help to give us an understanding as an endpoint provider or the endpoint sensor provider or monitoring tool provider, where we should do this. What is the optimal number looks like? Because again, I'm joining hand with services here. What is the optimal number? What is the right number? That's where I need all of your help. Any other question? No? So thank you for attending and spending your precious morning time on the last day of FCR. And we really enjoyed all the vendors. Thank you to vendors also. I know it takes a lot for you guys to come here, but I wanted you to have a very truthful, open information. And if you have any other question, feel free to reach out to us, right? We did this as a part of, to be honest, during the COVID-19 as our paradigm shift, that 80% out of work from 80% in work, right? Mobile devices were in a high demand, whether it's TS, DMCCS, DMUC, all of those. Again, we are moving towards a seamless experience for user. So thank you. And I want to personally thank Nate, Mike, and Kerry to be agreeing to this on panel because they did not had question ahead of time.
Thank you. That's